the talk I'm going to give is going to take about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's in two parts that are mixed up. One is about my practice, and the other is about the influences of a particular way of looking at cinema that informs what I do. And that primarily looks at how objects can be used as protagonists in cinema, and how they can alter narrative structures, subvert and distort genre, and create new forms of storytellings. And my work for the last 10 years has kind of experimented with that. It's a hypothesis that I keep asking myself creatively and trying to answer. So I'm going to start with the end, with one of the most important films in my database, called Kiss Me Deadly, which is a very prototypical film noir. As you'll see, I'm going to play the trailer for it.
Girls fleeing in terror from things beyond description.
Who are you?
My name is Mike Hammer, if it matters.
What do you want?
He was out to get men who tortured women and killed with the ferocity of wild beasts. This was their jungle.
Stop the knife!
Kiss Me Deadly stars Ralph Meeker, winner of the New York Critics Award. Through his great talent, the vivid character of Mike Hammer comes to life as never before.
They came last night, right after you left. I heard them. I hid in the basement.
Only a woman could help him solve the murderous riddle of Kiss Me Deadly.
She's dead. But I'm not dead. Hey, remember me?
This woman's lips, cold as steel, lethal as a gun, gave him the terrifying clue he sought. On this woman's lips.
Okay, you get the picture, yeah? It's a film by Robert Aldrich from 1955, so it's a very late film noir. And it's, for all intensive purposes, absolutely prototypical. It has everything that a film noir is required to have. It has a hard-nosed private detective who is not afraid to use his fists. It's got femme fatales who will shoot a guy before they kiss them. And as far as everything's concerned, aesthetically, narratively, it's a film noir. And audiences from the 50s came to see a film noir when they came to see this film. And typical to these films, everybody's after something, and that something is this box. And throughout the whole film, no one knows what's in the box. But people are dying left and right, and our hero, the private detective, is trying to figure out where the box is and what's inside of it. And because it's a film noir, we all assume that it holds something that everybody in film noir wants, which is usually money or diamonds or something like that. And here's where this movie becomes very special. It's in a scene that's about 3/4 of the way into the film.
May I help you, sir?
This key, what's it for?
Are you a member, sir?
No, just tell me about the key.
Pardon me, sir, if you're not a member. My dear sir.
Now, tell me about the key.
It's a locker key, sir.
Whose?
Just a minute, sir. It's,
Well, whose?
It's, Nicholas Raimondo, 10-year membership, sir.
Take me to it.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, 10 people have died. Finally, he finds out where the box is. Yeah.
This is it.
It's hot.
Hot, sir? Pardon me, sir. What is it?
I don't know, but whatever it is, keep away. Don't let anybody near.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is, I think, one of the more, for a geek like me, it's one of the more important moments in cinema history because something very special happens. In one moment, because of this box, not only is the audience confused, but the hero of the story is confused. Like, he thought he was in a film noir, he thought he was the hero, he's the private detective, and suddenly everything has changed, and actually the genre has suddenly switched to science fiction. And he feels really out of his depth now. He's like an old-time private detective in a science fiction film. And what this box ends up being is like a handheld atomic bomb. And suddenly, we're no longer looking at just a film that's supposed to be entertaining, it has an edge to it, but the era when the film is made, 1955, comes into play. We're in the beginning of the Cold War, and all of a sudden there are fears that are much larger, much more global in scale than what film noir can contain within its own parameters, which is cities, gangsters, bad guys, violence on a kind of urban level, greed. All of this starts to become petty compared to these warring ideologies, communism and capitalism, atomic annihilation. And so I think this film is an amazing example of representing that, and it's amazing because it's done through this object. So I'll just show you the end of the film. So the femme fatale's got her hands on it as well.
Hello, Mike.
Where's Velda?
Come in. Come in. Kiss me, Mike. I want you to kiss me. Kiss me. The liar's kiss that says I love you. It means something else.
So it's not only the end of the film, but it's the end of the world that the film depicts, which is a nice point of symbolism from the director, I think, that this noirish world is no longer interesting anymore, and that there are new fears and new thrills that will become part of the public conscience, and cinema has to accommodate that now in a way. So another influential director who uses objects pretty predominantly in his films is Cronenberg. Mostly in the films that he writes. So he writes objects into films as importantly, they have the same status as objects, as actors often. And usually, what's interesting about these objects is they are physical representations of one of the character's psychological states. So, because it's a Cronenberg film, whoever's the hero, it's never a happy ending. Yeah, everything descends into horror, into ugliness, into visceralness, and these objects often mutate in order to physically represent that as well. Sometimes they even physically mutate into that person's body and makes them sort of sick and ill, and they become half human, half biological, half mechanical. It's never pretty. You also get these amazing interactions with these inanimate objects that become animate, and I'll talk more about that later. So on the left is Conspirators of Pleasure by Svenkmeyer, and on the right is Videodrome. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit now about my practice. This is an image from a small survey of my work that was in Paris last year. And so I show a combination of films where objects play primary roles, and then I also show the objects out of context in a gallery. So I'll explain some of these pieces in a bit. So one of the first works that I did that investigated this was 10 years ago now, called Object for Lonely Man. And it's about a man who's so obsessed with a particular film, it's Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, or À bout de souffle, that he builds like a giant TV tray that has all the physical properties of the film. And he basically can act along with the film. So he wants to completely physicalize the experience of watching and become the main character. And this is the best way he knows how. So I know there's a limited amount of time. I might show this at the end if there's time. I'm going to show another film in a bit. This is the film I'm going to show. There's a film from 2005 called Desire Management. And it's 5 stories about people who are engaging in kind of unorthodox behavior, fantasies, and they use objects as that way to escape. So there's something very personal, very singular about what they want in life. And normal kind of mainstream consumer society doesn't provide for it, so they've built these objects specifically to cater to this very acute little fetish of theirs. So I'll play this film now. It's about 10 minutes long, 11 minutes.
Vaca distrattamente abbandonato, l'occhio sotto cappello ha nasconduto, mani in tasca che bavarai vaca ci scanne stelle caso asciutto. vaca distrattamente abbandonato, l'occhio sotto cappello ha nasconuto, mani in tasa che bava dato, vaca ci scanne stelle che hanno
another film I did. Again, I'll go through, and if there's time, I'll show some of the films. But there's a film I produced with another artist called Onkar Kular, someone who I collaborate with a lot. We were given a grant from a medical foundation in London called the Wellcome Trust, which was a wonderful commission because they said, do whatever you want as long as it has something to do with the medical industry. And we, at the time, were interested in developments, or some both scientific and philosophical developments that we're looking at the potential for immortality to actually happen at some point. And we decided to produce a kind of vampire film where everybody is potentially immortal, and after a certain while you get bored. And we thought, well, what if death becomes some kind of creative venture that people sort of experiment with? People experiment with painting, and with other mediums. Why not? What if death becomes a medium? And so we ended up researching a couple of true stories that we decided to dramatize, and produced, again, 3 vignettes where it relates to how people might address death if there is none in the future. Again, I'll see about how we are on time, and I can show this. And this is the last film I produced last year, which is a short looping film that looks at how we understand certain key moments in genre. In this case, it's spy films. And so what you see is an exchange of documents, famously by 2 men in some deserted space. And it was shot both at a kind of a sort of consistent cinematic point of view from the ground, and also from a very high distance. So we start to see different kind of camera typologies emerging. I don't know how many people have seen recent films, but it's in any thriller now, it's amazing how many satellite footage film shots you get. So we're actually being watched at a very high resolution, it seems. And so that's going to inform different ways that cinema produces imagery for us to imagine whether it's real or fake. Okay, I'll talk a bit about another area of research that also informs the workshop that we're giving. And there's an amazing category of films where objects become animated, right? So dead things become living, and as a result, narratives are shifted, things change. They move either from something pleasant to something horrific. So on the left is Beauty and the Beast, and on the right is Evil Dead 2. It's basically the same story. Things come to life, but rendered in totally different genres.
While the cats do this, I'll chew it, I'll be bubbling, I'll be brewing, I'll get bored, I'll be hot. Heaven's sakes, is that a spot? Clean it up, we want the company impressed. We've got a lot to do. Is it 1 lump or 2 for you, our guest? She's our guest.
So again, there's this interesting point where, okay, through magic, whatever, through science, objects start to come to life, and at some point they develop thoughts or needs of their own that either work beautifully with our own, and we all live together in a Disney film. It's a big musical. Or they have needs that are not like ours, and there's a conflict, and that conflict leads to a kind of horror. And there's an amazing progression of these types of films from very early on, already in numerous science fiction literature, but then very quickly in science fiction film it became apparent that anything that is alive, that is not like us, can be immediately moved into the horror genre. It scares us. There's a period where it's disgusting, we're afraid of it, we don't know what it is. And cinema represents this in very interesting and diverse ways. And one of my interests is to categorize and subcategorize all these different little subgenres. So I'm going to take you through a couple. This is a film called Maximum Overdrive from 1988. It's a very bad film, directed by and written by Stephen King. No, it's Michael Crichton, who wrote Jurassic Park, directed it. And it's a story about, again, through some, a bolt of lightning hitting the wrong place, every electrical object in America has come to life and wants to kill everybody that they can. So here's a couple of scenes.
Come on, sodas. I'm buying.
So again, part of what's interesting about this, even though it seems banal, but for me it's kind of interesting, is yeah, you're an electronic object and you want to kill somebody. What can you do? If you're a drinks dispenser, how can you kill somebody? If you're a little remote control car, what can you do? And this in turn informs, again, a kind of very innovative way of telling stories in cinema.
Andy?
This is Chucky, the doll, and this is another subcategory of living things,
Andy,
dead
this
things
isn't
that come
funny.
to life. Because it's a doll and it has a face, and so there's a whole new area. I'll let you watch it.
You've been very naughty, Miss Kendall.
So again, this is a doll that it has a face, so it has expression. It's acting, actually. It is acting. It's emoting. It's happy. It's sad. It's angry. And so there's another layer, again, another subcategory of objects that come to life. How is it expressed? Okay, one of the more interesting film series is a group of films. There's now 4 or 5 of them called Phantasm. And if you watch one, then you're sort of hooked, and you become, you come to love them. And there's a very interesting part of the film. The premise of all the films is that there's an evil guy called the Tall Man, and he controls these flying spheres that fly around and kill people. And they're hyper-engineered objects. And so the way that people die is based on what the technology is inside of these spheres. And because there's 4 films, every film, the sphere has to become more complex. It has to kill in unique ways. And this also informs how the work is shot, because they fly. Again, the horror element is all purposefully designed, and this is something that occurs before the film is made, and then the film has to accommodate this object. So I'll show some clips from a couple of the films. That's the Tall Man. very briefly, I'll mention another category which is informing a new piece of work at the moment is masks in cinema. And there's a very interesting division of masks that I've been working on addressing, which are basically masks that are hard and masks that are soft. Masks that are hard incorporate most of superheroes, any kind of villain, and the films kind of revolve around the fact that this person with the mask cannot integrate into society. They're an outsider, either a good outsider or a bad outsider, and finally ridding that person of its mask is sort of the final aim of the films. But masks that are soft, that basically adhere to the face, or are made up of other people's skins, or can magically kind of skew, are actually the most interesting ones, because they allow the person who has the mask to test sort of societal limits, because in effect they become someone else, someone that can still integrate into society, but not themselves. And what that means is that they can misbehave. And one of the classics one is this old Jim Carrey movie called The Mask, where kind of miraculously no one cares that he's green, whatever, it doesn't matter. But again, he's constantly testing the limits of what's socially acceptable. So there are a lot of films that tie into this, which I find very interesting. And then there's automobile culture, and the fact that cars themselves as physical objects, when filmed, inform the speed of the action that's taking place. Where is it taking place? It's taking place outdoors, not indoors. It's taking place on highways. And in turn, the object itself, a car, its weight, its speed, becomes something destructive and violent. So one of the classic films from that genre is Death Race 2000, a futuristic film about a race across America where the aim is to kill as many people as you can in these super customized cars. So do you have the TV show Pimp My Ride, where cars are customized? So this is an early 70s film. This in America, this culture was running rampant. This was one of the iconic films that launched this sort of revolution of customization in automobiles at the time. So yeah, it's a simple premise. They race across America, and different types of people get you different types of points. So elderly people are 100, teenagers are 10. And I'll play another clip from this as well.
What is that?
Euthanasia Day at the geriatrics hospital. We do it every year.
Here he comes! He's coming!
This is the car, and it's like the Jaws film of cars.
Hello, Wade. It's me, baby. No, I'm home. Chaz went over to his place. He said he'd be back in a few minutes. Wade, no, I'm all right. I'm all right. Listen to me. Listen to me. As I was coming up to the house, that crazy wind came up. It almost blew me off my feet. Wade, I think I hear the engine of that damn car. Wade, it sounds so weird. Wade, I'm scared. No, I promise you I won't go out. Tell me what to do, baby.
Okay, so again, even in killer car films, there are subcategories. There are cars that are driven by people that kill. There are cars that are driven by themselves that kill. There are cars that kill by running people over. And there's cars like Carrie, which kill in any which way they can. Inside,
shit.
outside, doesn't matter. The car is in love with its owner, and it gets jealous of any other women that he's with. Okay, so I'll talk about another project that I completed about 2 or 3 years ago now. So all these images are images of what's called a MacGuffin. It's a term that was penned by Hitchcock, and it describes the thing, that one object, or could be anything, but it's that thing that everybody is after in a film. So obviously in Indiana Jones it's some kind of sacred relic. In the Maltese Falcon it's the Maltese Falcon. Rosebud is considered one from Citizen Kane. Everybody wants to know what Rosebud is. And then in numerous Hitchcock films you have a MacGuffin. In Casablanca it's the passports, right? And what these objects, it doesn't really matter what they are. They could be replaceable. But they have to be of singular importance to the characters and make them move through time and space. That's what gives cinema its fluidity, its movement. It's not just stagnant. It's not a theatrical play in a single room. Sometimes it is, but mostly it's trying to move us through space and time in dramatic fashion. And this is the reason why the characters do so, or one of the reasons whys. And so working with Anka Kular again, we saw this object as kind of an interesting typology, and we thought of taking it out of cinema and trying to use it to tell our own stories, our own cinematic stories in a way. And so what we ended up doing was producing these MacGuffins and then a very short film synopsis of 150 words that describes what the film is that this object sits within. Ideally, what we thought was it was a kind of distillation of cinema to the point that it was enough of a clue for the audience so that they could build the film themselves. They would produce it themselves. They could see the imagery themselves. They might even cast actors in it. They might, put Adrian Brody in it or Sophia Loren in it. They might have someone direct it based on the plot line. And what it allowed us to do was to produce. At the moment they're 16 and we keep adding to it as it gets shown in different places. It allowed us to produce cinema without actually making the film, because films are very difficult, very costly. And there was some kind of satisfaction that we derived from just producing the object and the synopsis. So I'll go through some examples. This is an installation in Israel. And I'll talk briefly about how they're made. And I apologize for the shakiness of the screen. So this is, basically they're displayed. There's this very short story about them. In this case it's about Julian and Ethel Rosenberg, who were a famous couple who were executed for treason in America for selling secrets to the Soviet Union. They left behind 2 children. And so we sort of retell the story. It's kind of half historical, half fictional, where we imagine that we want them to escape, and the only way for them to escape is to find these passports. And so the passport becomes the MacGuffin, and this is how we built these objects. So we took various, we did a lot of research into American passports from that period, and then we crumpled some, and then in using a 3D modeling program, in this case Rhino, we worked with some amazing 3D modelers to build them, and then we had them rapid prototyped in a machine. Do you all know how rapid prototyping works? No? Yes? Effectively it's 3D printing. There's various ways that you do it. You can glue powder together in 0.1 millimeter, but basically you divide everything into these tiny fragments, tiny layers, and it slowly prints it up into 3 dimensions. And you can get incredible detail, which is something that we were really interested in. What is this object? Is it a sculpture? Is it a prop for a film? Is it a product in and of itself? So I'll just go through a couple. This is about a murder story in a Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn in the 70s. This is imagining, like Philip K. Dick's story, The Man in the High Castle, that the Nazis have won the war, and all of the world is divided between the Japanese and the Nazis, and they get England, and they have to figure out how they can kind of warm themselves to the English. So it's sort of a comedy, a black comedy. So we built this Nazi teapot. So these are the two influences. This is one closer to home. So it's a story about. It's a big mix of fiction and history, but basically we imagine that these two history students uncover letters by Mikhail Bakhtin, and in this case he gets imprisoned in Siberia. And in those letters they discover that somewhere in one of the gulags, one of the head wardens built an exact size replica of the Odessa steppes. And so they want to know whether these steppes still exist, so they go on this, adventure in Siberia to try and find them. And we don't know why he's had all of the Odessa steppes built, but hopefully the audience is there to try to understand why. This is a section of a piece of a machine that these engineers build, and they don't know what the machine as a whole does, but they're a little bit afraid that it's not something nice. There's a Mickey Mouse urn, so it's a story about Disney and his very strange political aspirations. This is a kind of remake of Peeping Tom. So we remade the camera from this iconic film, a beta cassette. This is a science fiction film where in the future, the Atlantic basin is completely dried out. So it's a big, huge canyon of land in between Europe, Africa, and America. And people once again try to discover America. And so they have to cross the Atlantic by foot. This is a mold for making Jeff Koons balloon dogs. Do you know these balloon dogs that he makes? So it's a story about elderly people who figure out a way to make a lot of money. And it was inspired by a true story of this family that sold for tens of years fake artifacts to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. They made hundreds of thousands of pounds. And were just found out maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There was a very nice story. The V&A, they lost hundreds of thousands of pounds on this stuff, but they enjoyed the idea so much that they bought all the other forgeries and even the hut where they were building all of them, and had an exhibition of forgeries. It was a nice little touch. A shirt. This is the Spear of Destiny. It's a relic. Indiana Jones would want it. So it's supposedly the spear that pierces Christ's side, this blood that runs from the edge there. And so it's a relic that was passed on through many areas. Apparently now it's in Vienna. A lighter, a pair of high heels. Sorry, I'm going to go through this. These are just photographs of famous people who have been killed in car accidents. And so we did research into James Dean's car accident in particular, and told a story around parts of his car, which were, there's an urban myth that any part of the car later that was taken and used actually was haunted, and the people who were driving it were also hurt or killed. So we recreated that in a story. Okay, the last piece of work I'm going to show is the last thing I did, which was an installation in the Victoria and Albert Museum, where I took, again, we liked what we were doing with the MacGuffins. We felt that there was value there. There was something sort of intellectually unique about what we were doing. We didn't know what it was, but we wanted to continue further. And so we produced the second part of this, which is we took the family saga as a genre, and we produced a fictional family and imagined that one of the members of the family is remembering his 3 generations of his family's life, and he singles out these moments that are linked to various objects, and he has those objects exhibited in a gallery. So this was an amazing gallery that they gave us. and we produced a very large edition, which is sitting kind of halfway in my bedroom and my kitchen at the moment, of 26 objects, also rapid prototyped. They're exhibited like this. And the way we produced the family is Onkar, again, the partner I'm working with. We took our collective family history. We took our family histories and we combined them. So we imagined at some point that he's an Indian Sikh. So he's the one in the middle who's not wearing a turban. And this is my family, Lithuanian Jews. And we imagined that they intermarried at some point in the 60s and had a Jewish Sikh family in London. Actually not as uncommon as you think, we found out. And then we also combined it with famous fictional and real families. So the stories that are produced, Royal Tenenbaums, Magnificent Ambersons, fictional, the Rothschilds, the Kennedys, and started to merge all these families together to create a soup that, in a way, let us speak about certain key moments in the 20th century that we were interested in talking about. So this is one of the films we produced for it. And we imagined if there was a film about our family, what would the actors look like? So we hired people that we thought would maybe look like our family and shot them as if this is the end of the film and you get to see them. So again, there's 3 generations of stories. So we told 26 stories running over 3 generations from the 1910s to the 2010s. And obviously I'm not going to go through each one, but the objects were on display, and then there was a catalog where you could read all the stories and take them home with you. So I'm just going to go through the objects now. I'll sing a couple of out. So in this case, the story is about a secret that the grandfather tells the curator of the show, and he says, you cannot tell this to anyone, and the child really wants to, but he cannot. So he finds a way of letting it out, so he builds a Lego model of it. So at least he expresses it in his most expressive format, but it means he's sort of said it without telling anybody what happened. Sorry, I wish I could tell more about each individual story, but there's a publication. I'll bring a couple out, and I'll have the stories online very soon if you want to see them. So these are all full-size models as well. So this one I'll single out because we consider it our masterpiece, but it's a bar mitzvah cake in the shape of a stormtrooper helmet. Okay, and the last film is part of the show as well. It's a shot through a hospital corridor that the character, there's one single hospital in London that the curator is constantly revisiting through his life for the birth of his daughter or the death of his grandmother. Everything of major significance seems to happen in this one hospital in Whitechapel. And so he's constantly revisiting this hospital. And so in this video, we have this looping, permanent corridor and display that he seems to be consistently running through. Okay, thank you very much.